Welcome to the Africa Wiki Women Voices podcast. I am your friend and host, Oluwapelumi Tosin Aina. In today's episode of the podcast, we are going to be discussing the impact of internet access on women's rights in Africa, mainly how access or lack thereof to the internet affects women's rights and gender equality across the continent. And my guest today is a global voice. I call her a powerhouse, a very ardent advocate of digital rights with years of quality experience and impact. Her name is Sandra Acceng. She is an executive director of Women of Uganda Network, where she advanced gender responsive digital rights and ICT policy, a researcher, policy analyst, and Wikimedian. She leads data justice work in Uganda and advocates on technology facilitated gender-based violence and freedom of expression. Our recognition include Defenders Human Rights, Defender of the Month, February 2021, and fellowship with GNI Internews and Optima. She is also an advisory group member for African Symposium on Technology Facilitated Gender-Based Violence by United Nations Population Fund. Sandra currently serves as the advisory group member for the 2025 UNFPA Global Symposium on Technology Facilitated Gender-Based Violence. Sandra, you are most welcome on the Africa Wiki Women Voices podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited about this conversation, and I love to have conversations, especially with women who are trying to uplift other women in different spaces. Call it the digital rights space, the any kind of space that really is a space that historically or from socialization is not considered a space for women, such as the digital space. So I'm very excited to be talking about this very important topic with you and looking forward to how this unfolds. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much, Sandra. Thank you once again. Welcome to our Africa Wiki Women Voices podcast. Sandra, you are a very interesting woman, honestly. And I remember when I reached out to you, I called you a powerhouse. And I really meant that because, I try to follow your work on digital rights and, your years of experience online. And truly, you are doing an amazing and powerful work. So tell me, how does it feel, being a woman, driving that level of change across the African continent? And especially what you have done in Uganda. What does it feels like, shouldering that responsibility? Yeah, really.
Wow, that's an interesting question. I think for me, what really drives me and what motivates me to be able to do that work is just this morning when I had an interview with a woman street vendor who has now grown and now owns a shoemaking space. So we just had this conversation about meaningful connectivity, and this morning she calls me and wakes me up with a call and say, Sandra, based on the conversation that we had, I think it's important for the women that I lead, it's a women's group, that they should be able to be trained on digital literacy to be able to market their goods online. And what would I say to such a person? I just told her, I got you. We will do something. Draft me something and share it. We'll be able to figure out without funds or with funds. So for me, those are the things that drive me to be able to speak to women of different levels, and also to be able to see that as women who are in the spaces, how are we able to create spaces for women to be able to actually access the opportunities they have. You might be in this position where you're able to access the opportunity to have, but another woman may not be able to access that opportunity. But how are you able to ensure that the opportunity you have is also being accessed by other women, and this involves being able to speak about what you cannot, the privileges that we have, especially for us as some women, but also being able to, as a woman, I think, for example, being able to take up spaces that has been considered to be for men, it comes with some challenges. It comes with you being, especially, seen as a space that you're taking, not considered for what for women, and being able to have a voice. So for me, one thing is really seeing how do we as women, when we're in these spaces, able to ensure that society sees it as something that we do not have a voice for. How do we have the voice? How do we strategically position ourselves for to advocate for things that we do? So for me, every time I wake up is how do we ensure that a space such as an internet space, women are able to access the internet, women are able to openly, freely, safely, and securely access and use the internet. How do we work with the resources that we have as women? How do we collaborate as women, with money or without money, to be able to do something that is impactful, especially for women who may not be able to have certain privileges? So for me, those are the things that really, really push me to continue to champion women's rights online, in Uganda and beyond. Thank you.
Wow. That is really, really inspiring. Really inspiring, honestly. Okay, and I'm really so excited, and I'm so positive about today's discussion because we really started off on a strong note. All the things you've said are really, really inspiring. So Sandra, I'd like us to dive into our conversation today, which is your area of expertise. Gender inequality is not it's not news, right? It's not new. It's not a new phenomena in the society. Almost everyone is aware of women's underrepresentation across society and sectors. Even in the Wikimedia ecosystem, you are a Wikimedian. I'm also a Wikimedia. In the Wikimedia ecosystem, the pattern is also the same: fewer women in leadership and far fewer content about women on the across diverse Wikimedia projects. However, there is a need for us to really understand if women indeed constitute a marginalized community and to grasp the severity of what we are dealing with. So, Sandra, to what extent those the female gender exemplify a marginalized community, and could systemic social and cultural practices be the underlying cause of this marginalization?
Okay, so what I would say is that, and as Sandra, I can really affirm that the female gender really continues to exemplify marginalizations, a marginalized community, particularly in the digital space. And also, what is interesting is that the digital space is connected to the physical realm or the physical space, because what really could start from the online space could also go to the offline, or it could stand from the offline to the online. And this is due to the deeply entrenched systematic, the cultural, and also the social inequalities that exist. And we have seen in our work at First and how women and girls, especially in Uganda and also across East Africa, face disappropriate barriers to be able to access, to be able to use, and also to be able to also benefit from technology. And these barriers are not accidental, I can tell you. They are as a result of the patriarchal norms, the gendered power structures, but also the institutional negligence that we have excluded, historically, that exclude women from some of the spaces, that the decision making spaces, but also from the tech policy spaces, the digital governance spaces, the online safety spaces. And what our research and some of the community based work that we've done reveal that technology facilitated gender based violence is both a symptom, is also a tool for marginalization. And women who speak out loud, women who lead, or women who even exist online are often met with harassment, they are met with surveillance, and also they are met with threats. While we see that the legal protection remained very weak for women and also poorly enforced. And during the Uganda electoral periods that we are currently in, we have seen how we documented women leaders and journalists who have been targeted with gender disinformation and online abuse, often with no meaningful records. So marginalization is really further compounded by limited digital literacy, economic exclusion, and also the cultural stigma, especially in the rural areas. So many women really do not report online harassment or online harms due to fear of public shaming. You report, and then the next day you're moving out, you're being public shamed. Also, lack of trust in law enforcement, or simply not knowing their rights. So, what we've done at Women of Uganda Network, some of the approach has been to shift the narrative from really focusing on only survivors to also understanding the perpetrators. What are their motives? What are the systems that enable them? So through some of the work that we've done with the Women's Rights Online Network, we did a research on perpetrators research roadmap, whereby we are contributing to a global movement that demands platform accountability, that also talks about gender sensitive regulations, but also the community rooted interventions. So, yes, what I would say is that the systematic, cultural, and also the social practices are not just the underlying causes, but they also the drivers of marginalizations of women. And unless we really dismantle these systems, especially through feminist policy advocacy, inclusive designs, digital designs, and also grassroots empowerment, and also using some of the principles such as the feminist principle of the internet and all that, I would think that the promise of a true, open, free, secure, equitable internet will really remain out of reach for many, especially the marginalized communities such as women as at large. Thank you.
Wow, that's really powerful. Really, really powerful. That's the mouthful. You've said a lot, and I'm going to bring a follow up, question based on what you've said. You've mentioned, you actually said a lot about gender based violence and how the digital space itself really amplifies gender based violence. Now we all know that digital gap is actually real, right? There is an underrepresentation of women in the digital space. Quite a lot of women across Africa do not have access to the internet or do not even know how to navigate the internet. But yeah, just like you mentioned, online gender-based violence has also emerged as even a bigger challenge. For many women, it feels like being caught between the devil and the blue sea. Now you were trying to bridge the digital divide while also navigating the constant threats online. Today, across all levels, women are disproportionately the target of online violence. In Africa alone, I was actually going through some research, and I saw that more than 50% of women, in Africa, have actually experienced some form of online violence. So when we speak about digital gender gap in relation to online gender-based violence, I think it's actually really, really crucial that we ground the discussion in context. Yeah. So, how gravely you have an experience working with a diverse group and organization across Africa and in the world. And also you have what would I call it now? You have an experience when it comes to research and carrying out quite a lot of research in order to understand the problem. What are actually the fueling factors of all of the social gender or online gender-based violence. So Sandra, how gravely does cyber stalking, doxing, all of the cyber online gender-based violence undermine women's desire to access the internet and engage in the online work? Because I personally feel like the fact that we have this prevalence of online gender-based violence can actually, just like you mentioned the other time, makes a lot of women to actually step back, just want to be in the safe space because of this really, really huge challenge that we have on the digital space.
Yeah, and I like that you clearly stated about the gender digital divide, because again, issues such as cyber stalking and doxing are some of the things that really leads to the widening of the digital divide, that is gendered in that aspect. So what I would say in regards to that is that actually cyber stalking and also doxing really gravely undermines women's desire and their ability to be able to access and engage in the online world. And this is something we at Women of Uganda Network have really constantly documented and also addressed through our advocacy work, through research, like you mentioned, and also the community-based intervention, such as a feminist-led community or broadband connectivity, and I would say that these forms of tech-facilitated gender-based violence keep evolving. Does not stop at all the cyber stalking or doxing, but are not just also digital inconveniences. So they are really act of intimidations, control that have really that have real world consequences, especially for marginalized communities or structurally silenced community. So when women are stalked online, have their personal information exposed or doxed, or they are targeted with threats or targeted with harassment, the internet can really become a space of fear and rather a space of freedom, or a space where women can convene or organize as a group. So from work that we have done across Uganda and East Africa and also Africa at large, we have really seen that women tend to really withdraw from online spaces. They delete their accounts. They avoid public discourses. They self-censor because they're not sure of who is actually reading or accessing their information. You take a nice photo of you, and the next thing is that someone is stalking you. Someone is actually zooming in and out to see how you look and commenting on your legs, on how your boobs look like. So there's a lot of self-censoring of women, and also survivors really experience psychological trauma, including anxiety, including depression, and also including isolation, and also especially for opportunities for leadership and advocacy and economic empowerment are also being lost as a result of being publicly ashamed, especially for women who are in power, like in journalism, who are maybe reporting politically sensitive topics, and also the women in politics as well, and those who are activists as a whole. So young women and girls are really discouraged from engaging digitally, and therefore this really reinforced what we are sharing about the gender digital divide, or widen the gap further. So one of the examples, especially in one of the documented cases that we had, a young woman whose intimate images were leaked online, chose to leave all the digital platforms and also isolated herself socially. But despite the support that we're able to give from WUGNET's toll-free line on tech-facilitated gender-based violence, she never really pursued a formal justice due to fear of stigma, and institutional in action. So that is what I would say in regards to cyber stalking and what and harassment and also doxing as a whole that women face on the internet that continues to widen the gender digital divide. Both actually, by the way, on internet and also on Wikipedia as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandra. I'm going to. I really want us to also touch on the legal aspect because it's actually a very, very important phenomenon when we are having a discussion around this. But before we get to that, let's bring the conversation to roles and responsibility. The purpose of we having conversations like this is not just to dwell on the problem, but also to create a dialogue of solutions. So let's come to building pathways to solutions in terms of roles and responsibility. For women, in what way could we develop gender sensitive training programs in local communities to help women overcome online based violence? I really love the work you are doing in Uganda. Really, really being proactive and innovative with the solutions you're actually offering to some of these women who have actually at one point or the other experienced gender-based violence. Now, I really want also share, based on your experience and expertise, what are the trainings, that can actually be organized, innovative approach that can actually be used in local communities across Africa in order to actually help women overcome online-based violence.
Okay, so really to help women overcome, especially the fear of cyber stalking, of doxing, and other forms of technology facilitated gender based violence, such as gender disinformation, that currently has emerged and a very hot topic. Gender sensitive training programs in local communities should be very context specific, should be inclusive, and should be empowering. And based on the work that we have done, some of the approaches that we've done and the key strategies for developing such programs, one of it include being able to ground the training in local realities of the communities. And this involves being able to do maybe a needs assessment prior before doing a training that really speaks to the local realities. And this also involves using local languages, culturally specific, relevant examples that speak to their reality, but also incorporating real life case studies from community to make the risk and the solution very relatable, and also addressing the intersectionality barriers around disability, about rural access, around age, that really affect how women experience online harm. But also, secondly, is also build digital literacy and rights awareness by teaching women how to navigate the digital platform safely, looking at the privacy settings, looking at the reporting tools that are available, and also the secure communications that are available. And also seeing how do we educate them on their rights, the digital rights, including the laws like the Data Protection and Privacy Act of 2019 of Uganda, but also looking at the Computer Misuse Act that was amended in 2022, but also using some of the interactive tools that can actually be a fun way for women to be able to also learn gender sensitive programming, such as using maybe comic books that makes them very intimate, using maybe radio shows, and mostly or specifically community-based radio shows, and also like mobile-friendly content that really reach diverse communities or audience. And also another is also being able to see how do you include digital safety with defense, self-defense skills, because we need to train women on how to identify, how do they document and report online abuse, how do we introduce tools for being anonymous, for that allows encryption, that also encourages secure browsing for women, and also provide guidance on how to respond to doxing, to cyber stalking, and also including some of the psychosocial support or legal referral pathway that may be very important for women. But also, very importantly, how do we foster a peer support and also community solidarity for women? How do we create spaces both online and offline for women to share experiences, to support each other? Uh, Also initiate things like training community-based trainers on how they can share knowledge to others, and encourage, especially I think, male allyship, and engage men and boys in conversation that about respectful digital behavior. And lastly, is about really seeing how do we partner with law enforcement, the legal aid providers, civil society, to ensure that women know where and how to report help, and advocate for really gender sensitive policy response units, and gender based violence reporting desk in local situations. And mostly also, how do we monitor, evaluate, and adopt? How do we collect feedback, especially from participants, to improve our training content, our delivery, maybe use of community feedback loops to ensure that the programs really evolves around emerging threats and the needs for the community. So WOOCNet has really implemented several strategies through the online gender-based violence portal, the radio campaigns, SMS campaigns, but also training about recently 6,000 women and girls using a comic book, a safety, digital safety guideline. And these efforts have really shown that empowering women with knowledge, with tools, with community support is very key, especially in being able to reclaim digital spaces for them. Yeah.
Hmm. Wow, wow. Really amazing. You mentioned something that I really want to give a follow-up question to, and that was about including boys, training them and educating them about all of those things. Because I feel like too often when conversations around these issues take place, men and boys are not always included, more like they're most times left out. And then, as an expert, you would agree with me that excluding men and boys from this dialogue means we are actually missing the critical parts of the solution. So I want you to give a more in-depth insight when we come to roles and responsibilities of men and boys. What could actually be the impact of imputing awareness raising programs for digital violence and women's rights experts in educational facilities for boys, either from the in West Africa and Nigeria, we're going to call it, we call it primary school education, right? That's more like the first level of education for every child. From that level, inculcating that into the educational system, or more like having more training that doesn't just focus on the female child, but also on the male child, on how they can foster respect and all of these things in the society.
Okay. So really being able to input awareness raising programs, especially on digital violence, on women's rights into educational facility, especially for women and for men and boys, can have a very transformative impact, both for their individual behavior, but also the broader societal norms. So based on our work on community-based work and feminist digital rights advocacy, such programs has really make a progress. And for us, we integrate 70% of women and also 30% of men in all the work that we do, because we feel that for us to be able to bridge the gender digital divide, or for us to be able to counter the backlash that women face online, we need to be able to work with the men in this journey, Yeah, because majority and not all, I want to say that are the perpetrators. And how do we do this work without involving the perpetrators? I sometimes feel a bit sad. We know that as feminists, we're trying to create safe spaces, which is okay. But I feel
Yeah.
in some conversations, it's very important to have allies such as men and boys
Mm.
in conversation. So
Yeah.
this is very important because it helps to challenge the harmful gender norms, Harley,
Mm.
because when we have education institutions that are powerful space for shaping the values at an early age, introducing the men and the boys, especially in gender sensitive digital rights education, can really help to disrupt the patriarchal beliefs that normalize online harassment,
Mm.
objectification of women's body, or control over women's presence in the
Yeah.
online spaces. So when
Mm.
boys learn early that online abuse is not just jokes, but a form
Mm.
of violence, they are more
Mhm.
likely to become allies rather than perpetrators in our work. So, and also another is also being able to foster empathy and accountability through
Mm.
storytelling and through survivor story testimonies, but also
Mm.
interactive learning. And boys can better understand the emotional, the psychological stroll of cyber stalking, of doxing, of online harassment. And this really can build empathy, can encourage really respectful digital behavior and promote accountability, especially for men to really change how they behave. How do they respect women? How do they see this aspect of tech facilitated gender based violence? And they'll be able to understand it more. But also,
Mm.
another point is being able to create male champions for digital safety. From what
Mm.
we've seen from our experiences, it shows that when boys and men are engaged as positive role models, they can actually influence peers, they can, and also communities, and
Mm.
school-based programs can really nurture male champions because it has started from an early age,
Yeah.
and also who can advocate for a safe, for an inclusive online space, and also really challenge toxic digital culture and also toxic masculinity
Mm.
online. Yeah.
Mm.
So and also looking at the aspect of normalizing consent and digital
Yeah.
ethics, being able to see how do we embed digital ethics into curricula that help students understand consent in online interaction. When I say
Mm.
no, it's a no. Don't take a no
Mhm.
for a yes,
Yes.
including things around image sharing. When I share my image, I've not given you a consent to be able to distribute or circulate it online. Understand aspect of privacy and respectful communication. And this is really especially critical in an area whereby there's even AI generated content and defects
Okay.
whereby your image or your photo or your video is actually manipulated with AI
Mm.
and put things. I've recently come across a platform that was created by Elon Musk. I've forgotten it, and people usually say, "Oh, undress this woman for me." You know, they ask
Mm.
it on the Twitter, and it's really for me very very sad and very disappointing. So being able to
Mm.
understand those ethics and consent is very key, and also building a culture of prevention and not just reaction. How do we, rather than only responding to incidents, education can
Mm.
actually prevent digital
Right.
violence by equipping young people with tools to recognize, report, and also intervene in harmful behavior, both online and online. And also, when boys grow up in environments that normalize gender equality and also digital responsibilities, they are more likely actually to carry those values into adulthood into parenthood, influencing their workspaces, influencing their families, influencing the policy spaces actually as well. So we've really seen the value of this approach of being able to ensure that we also do a bit of the training of trainers model where both men and women are equipped to lead digital rights education in their communities and also integrate this into formal education system that would actually scale impact, would institutionalize change, but also would help build a generation that really sees the internet not as a weapon, but actually a tool for empowerment, a tool for equality, where you can intervene, where you can interact, where you can share, where you can do much more as a community, and that would be a meaningful connectivity for me actually. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much, Sandra. That's a very comprehensive analysis, and for that question. And I really, really, I was so happy. I was smiling at some points when you made mention of the home, the family. I always say to people, the family is the first agent of socialization before a child. Get to go to school, have elementary education and all of that. It all begins from the home. And I really love the fact that you actually nailed that as well. The importance of even both parents actually, educating their children, both male and females, about all of these things because it might actually be very difficult, so practically impossible for a child, a boy child was actually being groomed to respect people, either male or female, to understand the rights of people, not to actually, be toxic. It's very hard and practically difficult for such a boy to grow up and begin to engage in, online violence, doxing, cyber stalking, and all of that against the other gender. So yeah, really, family also does play a very important role. And we're getting there in Africa, hopefully, when we have more of this context actually incorporated into the education curriculum. So the boys and girls from a very young age are being educated about the importance of all of these things and the consequence, it can actually have on the society when they actually engage in all of this, evil act. So thank you very much. All right, we're gradually coming to the end of the conversation. But now let's I want to also actually touch a little bit on the AI because you touched on AI. But hopefully we'll try to get to that before we end up. But now I want us to, bring it down to more about policies when we talk of digital, right? Your work around research policy. You've worked with organizations, NGOs, civil society, and government. And I have seen some of your works and publications on digital rights and all of that. And I personally think I'm not a digital rights expert, but I think when we talk of digital repression, and digital censorship, sometimes it often stems from it's often the root cause of internet shutdown when probably a government or a nation is actually trying to weaponize the internet or the digital space. We actually saw what happened in Nepal recently. Yeah. Now, when we speak about this, shutdown, instances of internet shutdown, digital repression, and all of that, how significantly do internet shut down in the women entrepreneurs, particularly young women, who often represent the majority of emerging business owners from operating their ventures smoothly? And what exactly are the broader economic consequences of this?
Okay, so this is a really interesting question because I did do some research on the impact of internet shutdowns or network disruption on
Mm,
women's rights online, and one of the groups that I was able to interview was actually women entrepreneurs. So this is very interesting in regards to that. So what I would say is that internet shutdowns really have a severe and disappropriate impact on women entrepreneurs, particularly young women who increasingly rely on digital platforms to start a business to operate a business and grow their business. And majority of people nowadays now really use the internet to
Yeah.
manage their business, you know. So this is especially true in the context like in Uganda, where digital entrepreneurship is a key pathway for economic empowerment. And now, ever since 2021 general elections to now, when we are going to 2026 general elections, the Facebook has still been blocked. For you to be able to access it, you need to use a VPN, and you can also access it using Wi-Fi. And it's not obvious for everyone. It's not obvious for a woman who may be based in a rural area or a context that is where connectivity is actually not a human. It's not key to her, you know. So internet shutdowns really do disrupt women entrepreneurs. First of all, many women-led businesses operate through social media, like I said, and they use mobile money, they use e-commerce platforms. And so when internet has been shut down, or some people say kill switch, you cut off access to customers, you cut off access to your supplies, to payment systems, and this really alter your operation instantly, you know, because you're not warned about. You may speculate internet shutdowns, but you may not know when this can happen. But also, because of the inconsistencies of online presence due to shutdowns, this can damage your business reputation, especially for startups that are trying to build their brand loyalty.
Mm,
Today you're there, tomorrow you're there. So it
okay.
really affect the aspect of trust and credibility, especially for startup companies. And also, normally, young women are often who run micro or informal businesses with limited capital. Even short disruption can lead to you losing a lot, missed orders, and inability to really meet your financial obligations. So there's then increased financial vulnerability as a person. And finally, also, shutdowns can really have severe access to mentorship, to trainings, and also peer communities, which are really very vital for women to navigate the male-dominated business environment. So this really isolates the support networks that you could have for mentorship, for trainings, and all that. So basically looking at also the broader economic consequences of internet shutdowns would be the widening of the gender digital divide, where women are likely to be excluded from recovery efforts or digital resilient planning, and also the shifted innovation and youth employment, whereby young women who are often at the forefront of digital innovations are now pushed out of the ecosystems, and they undermine financial inclusion, whereby with mobile money and digital banking systems are being disrupted. So women who are less likely to have formal bank accounts are disappropriately affected. So we have been able to document how internet shutdowns not only silence women's voices, but also undermine the economic agency. And that's why it's very important to advocate for gender sensitive governance. What does the governance of the internet look like? What are the legal safeguards against shutdowns look like? And also looking at the inclusion of women in internet policy conversation, making policy making conversations, and also investments in resilient, inclusive digital infrastructure that can actually help women to be able to access and use the internet. Thank you.
Wow, amazing. Thank you very much. I have this one last question for you before we actually wrap up the conversation. This particular concept, I think it's not very really, it's not like an household concept really. So I would really like you to give more a bit of insights about that as an expert in this area. In what way can digital poverty rival or even surpass environmental poverty in terms of severity and urgency? I know some persons listening to us right now, they might actually be hearing the word digital poverty for the first time. It's not like a word that is actually being used often, but I want to hear your perspective on this.
Okay, so the digital poverty can rival, and in some contexts can actually suppress
Mm,
environmental poverty in terms of its severity and also urgency, especially when viewed through the lens of gender, youth, and also economic opportunity. So why digital poverty can be really critically urgent is because in today's digital economy, the lack of internet access, device, digital literacy also excludes individuals from jobs, from markets, but also from financial services, and especially for women and youth. This means being able to be locked out of entrepreneurship, out of remote work, but also e-economic, e-commerce, or online entrepreneurship. And these are
yeah.
really key drivers of economic mobility. But also, another one is also that digital poverty can really disappropriately affect women, the rural communities, but also the persons with disability that really reinforce the cycle of marginalization. Unlike the environmental poverty, which is often really geographically concentrated, digital poverty can be invisible yet deeply entrenched across all regions. And also another one is also looking at digital access. Communities are cut off from online learning, from
Mm,
telemedicine, and also from public health information, especially critical information during crises such as the pandemic, the climate disasters, and all that. So digital exclusion really means limited access to information, to expression, to advocacy, to awakening the democratic engagement, and also silencing marginalized voices, particularly women and girls. So while environmental poverty, such as maybe lack of water, food insecurity, exposure to pollution is a very life threatening, and digital poverty is increasingly life limiting. It can restrict your access to very tools that are needed to adapt and overcome environmental poverty. And in
mm,
fact, actually, digital poverty can really exacerbate environmental poverty by
poverty.
preventing access to climate adaptation tools, excluding actually communities from green economic jobs, and also hindering participation in environmental governance. So, digital poverty is not just a tech issue, I would say, it's also a developmental emergency. So, without urgent investments in especially inclusive digital infrastructures, literacy, and also policy, we will be risking deepening the global inequalities and also leaving billions behind in the digital age. Thank you.
Wow, wow, amazing. It's been a minute, really. It's been a minute. Yeah. Amazing conversation. Very, very insightful perspective and, insights shared by Sandra. Thank you so much, Sandra, for coming on board today. Thank you, really, for sharing your expertise and, your experience and knowledge on this very important and crucial topic. All right, before we actually draw the curtain on today's episode, I'd want you to, give a word of advice to African women, young girls out there listening to you right now. Some of them are actually want to be like you know, in the nearest future, you know, a very powerful, strong advocate who has a very, very, very convincing audacity and confidence. So, what is your advice to them? What would you say to them?
I would actually say that it's very important for African women, because we are, first of all, African
Mm,
women, and we are women
mm,
based in Africa. So we may not have the privileges that people in the global north have. But
mm,
what I would say is that, how do we use the resources that we have to be able to
mm,
get us to where we want to be?
mm,
I like to listen to stories of women, especially women who are in, people that I look up to. How did you actually start this journey from where you were to where you are now? You know, so being able to have the right people in your networks, having mentors, and also starting from where you are. Because as for me, I started with when I finished school in 2017, I started with volunteering, and really trying to look out. I remember I used to look out for Eventbrite for any kind of convenings that is happening around, so that I could go and learn and network and just tell anyone what I am up to. You know, you never know who you're speaking to. You never
yeah,
know
really.
where your next opportunity could be. So
Mm,
yeah, right, mentorship, network, showing up. You know, when you're in a space, take up the space. How are you able to use that space to be able to be seen? You know, if you are in an event, be a helper. You know, how do you ensure that you leave a mark in someone's life in whatever you do?
mm,
You know, you go for events, but how are you going to be seen? You know, you have to be seen. We
mm,
always, as African women, have to prove a point to be seen. But then,
yeah.
how are we going to be seen in those spaces? How do we ensure that we are actually seen? So, volunteer to take a note, to a
Mm,
rapporteur at event, you know, tweet about event, do something that makes you seen, because then we have to really claim spaces that is meant for us, you know, and we have to use strategies that will help us to be able to go to such spaces. So as African, we can really, really, with several strategies, reinforce a safe digital freedom, and also economic stability, especially by adopting different strategies, right based, and also as an individual, inclusive, innovative, driven approaches that can really help us to go to where we want to be. So that's what I can say, and I would say, vivo power to all the women. And I know that we can be who we want to be if we put our minds to it, if we work together as a collective to holistically claim the spaces or reclaim the spaces that has been taken from us, both in the offline and in the online spaces. Thank you.
wow, really brilliant, amazing. Thank you so much, Sandra. Oh my God, you said, you know, that is gonna stick with me for a very long time, and I'm not joking. You know, leveraging the resources we have. How are we using it? Showing up and being seen. What do I have to do to actually be seen when I show up? Thank you so much. That was a powerful, powerful parting note. Really amazing. When I say you are a powerhouse, I meant it, and I'm very sure our audience also can really attest to that. That is how you path, you know, you end the discussion as a woman who is a powerhouse. Brilliant advice. And I hope you, our audience listening across Africa, would really, really take hold of everything Sandra has said and run with it. You can be whoever you want to be. Whatsoever it is you want to achieve, it is achievable. You just have to know, what do you have to do? How do you leverage the available resources to move you from where you are to where you want to be? Thank you once again, Sandra Acceng, for actually joining me on today's episode. And to our guests and listening at home, you know how we do it, okay? Share this episode with your friend, your enemy, a Wikimedian, a non-Wikimedian. This episode, the Africa Wiki Women Voices podcast, is not just limited to the Wikimedia ecosystem, right? We all are in the digital space, so we try to actually, make the conversation around everything happening because we don't want to actually segregate, people who are non-Wikimedia. So either you're Wikimedia or non-Wikimedia, trust me, this episode is actually for you and you're going to learn a whole lot of things. So share with your friend, your enemy, not Wikimedia, your neighbors, tell them about the Africa Wiki Women Voices podcast. And I remain your friend and host, Oluwapelumi Tosin Aina, your global girl from the western part of Africa. Thank you once again till I see you in the next episode. Bye bye.
Bye.